I'm here to talk about the essential role that each of us can play in achieving world peace. Hello, my name's Anna. I take photographs of civil disobedience, which has led me to cultivate a brilliant ability to be in the wrong place at the right time. I'd like to talk about the idea that peace is a possibility, not something we should write on t-shirts and forget about, or perhaps something that's just used as an excuse for war, but a real, tangible option. We are 100% responsible for our reactions to every interaction. With this, we write our own script. So here's a bit of my own. Like many teenagers, I had a very noisy sense of what justice was and was not. I thought everyone deserved equal rights and that differences should be celebrated. I thought everyone deserved respect, apart from those people who disagreed with me. I went on marches to demand these things. I waved placards, signed petitions, started arguments. I shouted my views until I began to lose my voice. But I started to notice on many protests that I went on that the anger at the injustice started to infect the mood of the crowd. And I couldn't help but notice those people who were walking by, who may not have a clue what the protest was about, and all they saw was the rage. It doesn't matter how just your cause, if you're frightening people, they're not listening. After more than 1 million people marched against Tony Blair's desire to bomb Iraq, many people who'd voiced a political view became disheartened. Almost overnight, thousands of people came to the toxic conclusion that if you feel you're not being listened to, you may as well not try. 10 years went by, movements blossomed, but to me it felt like momentum for change had faded into a quest for money. During this time, my mum became ill, and at the same time that leukemia had decided to attack her, a general sense of malcontent had started to sweep the globe. I sat in the hospital and remember reading news stories that were fed into my phone by a new website called Twitter. I used to sit with her in the hospital and read stories from the front lines of the Arab Spring which was occurring and Europe's fight against austerity. We used to sit together and read news stories about things which were occurring across the UK to try and save the NHS, which was so desperately trying to save her. I set up an account called Heard in London, and I began to document civil unrest. It was through Twitter that I was drawn towards the campaign against tuition fees and found myself watching a group of people being shown that peaceful protest may not be an option because the media only seemed to show them attention when they smash windows. I watched a generation losing their faith in politics before they were old enough to vote. As my mum began to die, scenes from the Arab Spring became more relevant, and tweets from Egypt were a constant reminder to me that the world was bigger than what I was struggling through. When Mubarak made his speech to step down, my mum asked for her oxygen tank to be moved in front of the TV. When she cried and said that she was so pleased that she'd lived long enough to see a free Egypt, it was the longest sentence that she'd managed for weeks. After I posted this on Twitter, a group of people in Tahrir Square sent me a message back to say that a group of people had just held our hands and said a prayer for my mum. They wished us peace. Twitter is a constant reminder to me that it's a very small world and that we're all battling the same basic things: the freedom and the peace to allow us to live our lives according to our own beliefs. When someone posted a blurry photograph of a police car on fire in Tottenham, I cycled down the road to get a photo myself and found myself in the middle of the riots. My naivety propelled me to start asking people what was going on. I told them I really needed to understand why they were so angry. I spoke to people setting fire to things, people with bricks in their hands, people smashing windows. Nearly every single response that I had could be boiled down to one thing: a lack of hope. No one smashes up their local corner shop or sets fire to a car on their own estate if they have a sense of safety and well-being. At one point, I got hauled against a wall by a group of guys intent on robbing me. I implored them to tell me what they had to say. I really wanted to hear the heart of people who were so hurt they were willing to tear the soul out of their own streets. Those men didn't just let me leave with my camera. They left me with the ability of learning how to listen without working out what I wanted to say. The riots really shocked me. And it wasn't just what I'd seen, it was this underlying sense I had repeated again and again. The people that I had spoken to seemed to have been asked their opinions so rarely they'd never had a chance to phrase one. And then along came Occupy, this ragtag bunch of people with some camping equipment and a revolution in mind. The camp outside St. Paul's became one of the largest displays of civil disobedience in our recent history. Despite the media's portrayal, it was a hub of education. There were environmental energy classes, economics lectures, there was a newspaper, the kitchen was feeding hundreds every night, there was intense political discourse every day. There was a free university. It was a group of people standing together saying, we may not know what the answer is, but let's face in the direction of a world where people are cherished and respected and see what could be possible. Occupy started dialogues on the front pages of newspapers and on street corners the world over about a system we're living in which makes the richest richer at the expense of a caring society. And it's with this idea of dialogue with which we can find hope. As soon as we engage in dialogue with someone, we're saying to that person, I see you, I feel you, and I know that you have something to teach me. Dialogue is not trying to persuade people your view is correct. It's a journey of mutual education to strip away those peripherals till we reach that point of shared humanity. Ultimately, it's demonstrating respect for another person's life. Time and time again, I hear people say they think world peace is impossible. Do you remember what the Mad Hatter said to Alice when she said something was impossible? He replied, only if you believe it is. If you want to believe that peace is not a possibility, I promise you'll prove yourself right. But if you'd like to join me in my outrageous optimism, my hope in a dream that we could live in a world which is more kind, more loving, where people are fed and have a roof over their head, I ask you to make a courageous decision to start your reactions from a place of compassion. Take a moment to pause and inhale when someone challenges you. If someone throws anger at you, summon within yourself the courage to not meet them with anger. At least give it a go. If someone throws disappointment at you, do you really need to meet them with the same emotion, in themselves or yourself? My central theme is this: if we only reflect what we receive, we perpetuate the problem of disunity. You can make a choice to revere the life of every person that you meet, even if they're not showing you they deserve respect. In fact, especially if they're not showing you they deserve respect, you show it to them anyway. And in doing so, we realize that we're all connected. Do you remember that theory that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, it could cause a tsunami in America? Well, imagine applying that theory to those hateful things that you say about that person at work, or that member of your family that makes you want to slam doors. Can you imagine if you responded with a bit more compassion? Can you imagine the tsunami of peace that your tiny action could cause? Now try applying that theory to the person that you're thinking about who's a brilliant example that proves me wrong. Because if that person isn't in your vision of what peace means, then those bigger world issues that make it to the headlines can never get resolved. Wars begin because one person did not forgive someone for something and refused to engage in dialogue. Those men who tried to attack me in the riots, they chose the opportunity to be heard over the financial gain of robbing me. It wasn't some miracle fluke. I showed them enough respect to ask their opinion. I'm not saying that there isn't a situation where horror can be committed upon another. There are terrible things that humans can do to each other, But there's not an act in history I can think of that cannot be traced back to a place of fear. Daisaku Ikeda said, "The type of world peace we should be striving for is a time when any woman, anywhere in the world, day or night, can walk home alone and feel safe." This is the vision of peace that I'm willing to dedicate my life towards. I plant this seed with you now, and it's yours to garden as you choose. As long as we think of peace as someone else's responsibility, it will remain very distant. One of my favourite quotes is, "People who say the smallest things cannot make a difference have obviously never spent the night in a room with a mosquito." Sometimes the bigger picture can distract us from taking responsibility for our own behaviour. You get to decide your impact on the world. Value yourself enough to know that your reactions make the world of difference. Peace is a possibility. Together, let's make it a reality. Thank you for listening.